What's up, you guys? In today's video, I'm breaking down Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book has had a tremendous impact on my life and how I think about my relationships, and especially how I engage with people, whether it's in my everyday life or in my work environment. So today my goal is to break down some of the key concepts that I learned and share them with you, so hopefully you can also apply them to your life. So this book is broken down into 4 key sections. The first section is really around handling people. I would say this is foundational or fundamental for just the way you think about relationships, engaging with people, and some of the main things to be thinking about. So one of the primary concepts is really around not criticizing, condemning, or complaining. I can in particular relate to this because I tend to be a little bit more type A, very driven. I have high expectations of myself. I also have very high expectations for other people. And when those expectations aren't always met, it's very easy to jump to criticism or maybe condemn somebody. And that's like fundamental flaw in establishing rapport with people and getting them to like you and be able to engage and creating that relationship capital. So the first foundational piece is do not criticize, condemn, or complain. Rather, what you need to focus on is how to be appreciative of those individuals, how to find other ways to bridge the gap. If you see things that aren't meeting your expectation, finding ways to, how can you help them? What can you do to get them to where you want them to be? Whether it's somebody that's maybe a service provider in some other aspect of your life, or maybe somebody that's even working for you, how do you bridge the gap and actually help them rather than condemn them? This gets us to the next point, which is really around being appreciative. Again, something I struggle with all the time, and I have to remind myself again and again and again to be more appreciative and be lavish with my praise. The more I think about this, I think for me the problem is really around people meeting expectation. And if you've met my expectation, then great, you've met my expectation. It doesn't deserve praise. But I've come to learn that's really the wrong way to be thinking about it. You really need to be thinking about people crave acknowledgement, people crave praise. I'm the same way. I want to be acknowledged for the good things that I do, no matter what aspect of my life it's in, whether it's with family, significant others, or whether it's the work environment. You want to be acknowledged, and you should be able to give that back to other people, especially when they're making improvements, they're striding in the right direction. Be lavish with your praise. And the last part of this kind of fundamentals section is really aligning yourself with what other people want. The keys to this are really taking an interest in understanding what other people want, what they're after, what they care about, what they're passionate about, and trying to figure out ways that you can find commonalities, which we'll get into in some of the other sections, but really trying to figure out ways that you can align yourself to the things that they care about and appeal to them in a way that it relates to the things that they care about. I think this is really powerful when you're talking about negotiations or making somebody heard with whatever their points of view are, and trying to draw the conclusion that, yeah, I'm with you, I want this thing too, and I also think this aspect of what we're trying to solve for aligns with that. And you can kind of weave it in. It's a little bit more subtle and difficult to do, but fundamental in developing rapport and that relationship capital throughout your life. The second concept he talks about in the book is really around being likable and finding ways and tactics to engage with other people, not in a manipulative way, but really building rapport and taking a genuine, authentic approach, and often the time to get to know somebody. A lot of times you can get so caught up with the day-to-day of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, you kind of lose sometimes the relationship side of things, or maybe that takes a backseat to whatever it is that you're after. So it's important to make sure that you're taking an interest in people, asking them a lot of questions, and getting to know that person on a deeper level, especially on the personal side. Now, one of the things he talks about in taking this approach is getting the other person to talk. And if you've ever followed anything that Chris Voss talks about, is mirroring or kind of like parroting back or reflecting back what somebody says. Now, the reason I like this is because it's a really good way to get somebody talking without necessarily knowing what the right questions are to ask. So for example, someone could be talking about their weekend or whatever it might be, and they might say something to the effect of, oh yeah, weekend was great, I went out to dinner, had a really good time. And the other person in the conversation might say something, had a great dinner? Like, oh yeah, I went to this new restaurant, this Argentinian place, the steaks were great, also had some really good wine. And you can kind of see what I'm doing there, and it's maybe a simple example, but it's a really good way to engage in the conversation when you don't necessarily know what to ask the other person. Maybe you don't even know the context of what their interests are, and it keeps the conversation flowing and gets them talking, which again, a fundamental part of making that person feel heard and making them feel like you took interest in them. One of the next points can be simply summarized as smile. Now, we all have pretty good smiles and we should show it off more, but especially in today's world where we're on video in front of cameras a lot, you're on Zoom calls in front of the camera. One of the things I've noticed now that I've had the opportunity to actually watch myself on camera is I see my resting bitch face, and I've seen myself in meetings kind of just staring there, and I literally look angry when I might not necessarily be angry. But the point of like smile is really about maintaining a positive interaction, a positive demeanor, being mindful of your facial expression, your body expression, and making the other person feel at ease, making them have them feel comfortable about your presence there, and making them obviously feel that you're not mad or you're upset or whatever it may be. You may be conveying emotions that you're not actually feeling. So the key here is being mindful about being positive, your emotion, and how you're kind of conveying yourself in a given conversation. The next part that Dale Carnegie goes into is really around using another person's name. This has a number of subtle effects, I think, throughout your conversation with somebody. I noticed that not a lot of people do this. I personally feel a little awkward and a little uncomfortable trying to implement this tactic or this tool, but I do notice it when people do it really good, when I'm having a conversation with them and they actually address me by my name, and I notice when people do it several times. And the more I think about it, I think it comes down to this like subtle feeling of being seen, being heard, having some level of significance or importance. And despite how subtle it is, it's super effective in engaging you in the conversation, feeling important and feeling heard by the other person. So the last couple points that Dale Carnegie gives in this section around being likable is really around making the person feel heard by taking interest in the things that they're talking about and trying to focus a lot of the conversation on the things that they are talking about. So maybe you've successfully leveraged some of the mirroring and you've elicited or got some other points from the conversation from them. You then have some actual things to talk about. In my case, it was around going out to nice dinners and having nice Argentinian steaks to South American wines. Those are ammo to things that you could start to then also talk a little bit more about, or you could share some of experience that you've had at a wine tasting or whatever it may be, and really focusing the conversation on the things that they kind of took you to. The other portion is really around making the other person feel big or feel important or acknowledging them in some form or fashion. One example that I'll quickly give is I was in a negotiation for a piece of real estate, and the seller, I could tell, had taken really good care of the property, had lived there for something like 30 years. And it was clear to me that, he really cared for the property. And so while we were in the early stages of talking about the potential purchase, I kind of, made a point to acknowledge him that he had clearly taken really good care of the property, really cared quite a bit about the place, and it really showed. And I was excited to, have the opportunity to make an offer. And so subtle things like that kind of build up relationship capital, and it's helpful in developing the rapport with that person over time, and again making them feel bigger or more engaged in their experience of you as you guys are interacting. So the third section in the book is really around, it's kind of framed up as arguments, but I would maybe call it more like negotiation or showing others how you're thinking. And really the first part is disarm arguments. Arguments never go anywhere. And at the moment you feel this kind of conflict arising, you have to figure out ways to disarm it. And one of the really good things that I recall from, again, Chris Voss's books on negotiation is around labeling. And labeling is a really good tool to basically call out the feelings that the other person is having, and it's really powerful in disarming whatever their conflict or whatever the emotion is that is attached to whatever the argument or the conflict might be. So for example, you might say something, it seems to me like you're really upset about A, B, or C, and you get the person to kind of agreeing with you. You're like, yeah, you're right, I am really upset about this. And it makes them feel heard and thereby disarms kind of the disagreement. And your response to this should not be to come back at them with whatever your point of view is. You need to kind of continue to build on, I understand how you feel, I hear you, I see what you're saying, and you really need to kind of get them out of that kind of heated zone, and then you can start to open up a dialogue around whatever it is that the argument may or may not be about. One of the other things that he talks about in the book, which I don't actually agree with, is really around getting to yes, or the yeses, as he says. I tend to, again, coming back to Chris Voss and his style of negotiation, I tend to more agree with the power of no and getting the person to a comfort level around, saying no to something that is in fact like a yes. So you might say something like, would this be unreasonable? And getting them to the no of like, no, that wouldn't be unreasonable, I think is actually more important than trying to get somebody to say yes as early in the conversation as possible. But it is something that he talks about in this section and focusing on that. So I'll let you decide for yourself whatever method is best. In fact, if you have an opinion on this, leave it in the comment section below, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. One of the other things that Dale Carnegie talks about in this section is trying to see things from the other person's point of view and being sympathetic to that. I'll give you a recent example. I had to replace a whole HVAC system at one of my properties recently, and then the guys had to come back and do a repair after I just spent thousands of dollars replacing the entire system. And they came back to me telling me that, they had to fix A, B, or C. And I went back to them and I said, look guys, like I just spent thousands of dollars for you guys to install this system. I would expect that it should be working. Why are you charging me again, yet another trip charge? And he went on to say, we're trying to run a business and we spent money to have this guy out there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just kind of like let him talk as much as possible. And I kind of just parroted it back. It's like, I really understand, you guys are trying to run a business. I get that. And, obviously you took time out of the day to have somebody come out of here and look at the system, and he spent a couple hours repairing this. And then I kind of went on to say, would it be unreasonable for me to think that you guys should have delivered me a working system after I spent $7,000 on this system? I said, would that be unreasonable? And again, you can see I was sympathetic to where he was coming from, but then I also brought it back to where I was at. I had just spent all this money, and I try to put it at an extreme, and I used, again, the power of no in that process. Ended up working out really well. We actually had a really good interaction, and the result of that negotiation or that disagreement, so to speak, was I got them to actually come look at my other property and give me a service call on that for free. So these are the kind of tools that you can see will develop over time as you're trying to navigate some of these discussions. So the last part of this section around negotiation or showing people your thoughts is really twofold. The first one is appealing to the other person's nobler beliefs. And the second piece is really around dramatizing your ideas. You'll also see this same theme, and again, Chris Voss's topics on negotiation, but it enables you to kind of bend the reality of like whatever it is that you're talking about in the moment. Again, I'll use the example of the HVAC guy I was just talking about. One of the things I brought up during the conversation, I was trying to appeal to like the bigger picture to him. And one of the things I said is like, look, I have several rental units and they all have forced air systems. This is just one of many jobs that I will need you guys for. Which is more important to you? Would you like to have me back as a customer? So I took this like one issue, this like $90 service call, and I took it to like potentially thousands of dollars of work, and I got him thinking about this in the conversation. The other thing, at the same time in that same conversation, I was also dramatizing the issue. I was basically comparing and contrasting $90 to like potentially thousands of dollars of revenue he could bring their business. And the nobler notion for him was he wants to save me as a customer. And so in that same discussion, I was able to kind of morph what we were kind of disagreeing about and getting him to like, hey, you need to come a little bit closer in this direction and get me to closer to like what I want, which at the time wasn't paying for their service fee, but I got him to then do some more work for me as a trade-off essentially for that particular argument. So that is the third section around showing other people's your thoughts, really around avoiding argument and figuring out ways to kind of navigate it. The fourth and final part of the book is really around being a leader and how to have an impact on other people. In this section, he kind of brings all of the things that we just talked about together, and he talks about how you can use this to have a positive impact on other people, especially as a leader. And I can relate to this in a big way as I am a manager of people and how I go about my day-to-day and how I think about motivating them to get them to where I want them to be, and how I can also, bridge the gap between wherever my expectations might be and where I want them to get to as well. I would say the biggest takeaway from this section, again, is really leading with praise, being appreciative, being very generous in your praise. Obviously be authentic about it, but every time you see it, acknowledge it, call it out, use the person's name, do it publicly. You really want to not miss out on those moments to acknowledge somebody and uplift them for what they're contributing and who they are to your team, within the organization, within whatever it may be. Be lavish with your praise. The other part about this is coming back to the criticism, doing criticism privately and being focused around it, being kind of pinpoint the specifics of what that person can and is able to do differently, and also making them feel like it's a very easy thing to overcome. Not that they have these like huge gaps or voids that they'll never be able to achieve. More about calling it out, being direct about it, not being overly critical about it, and making them feel like, look, all you need to do is make a couple tweaks, and I think you really have this nailed out, and you'll be in a much better place. The last couple topics that Dale Carnegie gets into in How to Win Friends and Influence People is really around asking questions rather than giving orders or direction. It's important as a leader to provide the overarching direction, but people don't love to be told what to do. And one of the ways you can do this is by asking for their help or asking for their input and allowing them to kind of steer the direction of where you're trying to take them in some sort of controlled way. And this really elicits people to feel engaged, feel important, and feel like they had an impact on the outcome of whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So this makes them feel much more engaged in wherever you're trying to take the team and making them feel as they're a big part of the outcome at the end of the day. And then lastly, give them a reputation to live up to. If you praise them and you kind of establish them as a big contributor and a really important role within the company or in your life or whatever it may be, you essentially establish a relationship for that person to live up to. And whether they're there just yet or not, they're going to have to continue to kind of like strive in that direction. So that's all I got for you in today's book breakdown on Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. As I said before, it's had a huge impact in my life. I continue to revisit this book time and time again to remind myself some of the things that I can apply to my life and better improve myself as a leader, as a friend, as a family member, in every dimension of my life. And I think you can use these same tips to improve your life as well. So if you learned anything at all from today's video, please smash the like button, subscribe if you want to see other videos like this in the future. Otherwise, until next time.